Charming, hardworking, and independent, he was the definition of a Texas cowboy.
He had every animal on the property that you could name.
He was an adventurous person.
And when he met a beautiful young woman to match his vigor for life, it seemed like the sky was the limit for them both.
We had a great life together, lifetime of great memories.
But on a dark spring night, someone got the drop on him.
There was one blow to the face and then a fall.
His cell phone was missing. His wallet was missing.
The investigation into his death leaves detectives with no shortage of suspects.
One resident had been awoken by shouting and door slamming.
He had a fresh injury to his face.
I didn't do anything. He just needs someone to blame.
I don't know nothing that's going on.
You've got people telling very different stories. It raises red flags.
Get you in any lies, you're involved. You understand?
This whole thing was a setup.
But will the truth ever come to light?
He really loved women, and I knew it.
Did a pretty good job of breaking down the character of my brother.
It just confused the jury.
I couldn't believe it. I thought we had it in the bag.
We come from a Christian family, but I don't think you've seen the wrath of God yet.
April 13th, 2010. It's a sunny spring morning in Austin, Texas.
Austin is a very diverse city. It has a lot of music.
It's a college town, a lot of clubs and entertainment venues on 6th Street. So there's definitely a young kind of electricity and fun type of vibe through the town.
But the vibrant Metroplex also has its share of crime.
It was around 7 a.m. A man frantically called 911 because he had discovered what he believed was a deceased male.
Please come quick. He looks hurt.
I was a patrol officer at the time working in Southeast Austin and received a 911 call of a person down at an apartment complex. And so I and other officers responded.
When police arrive, the 911 caller, Caleb Tate, points officers towards the victim.
He's over here.
I did locate a male lying face up on his back, kind of hanging over a small retaining wall, not in a position that you would normally see someone. He had trauma to his body and he was cold to the touch, which let me know that he had been there for a while.
The injuries to his face and the back of his head raised suspicion that there might be foul play involved.
Let's secure the scene, notify homicide.
All right.
Yeah, dispatch, go ahead and start major crimes to our location.
When homicide detectives arrive on location, they begin trying to identify the victim.
The deceased did not have a wallet on him, so there was no photo ID for the police to identify him.
We were really at a loss. We didn't even know who the victim was.
Trauma to her. Injury. His face.
Hey, I think I've got something here.
Near the body and the vegetation, they do find a set of keys.
If the keys belong to the victim, his car might still be parked at the complex.
There was approximately 12 to 15 vehicles in that area of the parking lot, and we just ran every single license plate.
When they ran one of the license plates, they found just what they were looking for.
Oh, that's him.
The driver looked just like their victim.
The description was of a Elmore Allen Jr. He was 49 years old.
His registered address was 15 miles away in Del Valley, Texas. How did he end up here?
Born and raised in a farming community 75 miles south of Austin, Elmore Allen Jr. had the spirit of a cowboy.
Everybody liked him and respected him. He was into nature, into horses, into good things in life. And he was an adventurous person.
He was the life of the party, no matter what. And he participated a lot at church. He loved singing gospel songs. He Love discussing the Bible.
Elmore had also built a lucrative career in trucking.
After graduating college, he moved up to Austin, Texas, and became an independent truck driver.
Elmore liked being his own boss and not having the constraints of having somebody look down over his shoulder. He was excellent at sales.
He was outgoing, had a very, very sweet personality, and had a smile that would you just love it. Almost to say you would kill for it. Women just loved Elmore. I say, yes, they did.
And Elmore loved women, too.
He was with a lot of women, and Elmore, when he had his first child, he was about 22.
By 1998, Elmore had fathered 7 more children.
Elmore's relationships with the mothers of his children never ended up working out, but he was still very involved in his kids' lives.
He was a dedicated father, and he really loved his children, and he spent a lot of time with each and every one of them.
But even after becoming a father, Elmore's wild spirit couldn't be tamed. Until his late 30s, when he met another single parent named Rochelle Smith.
Elmore and I met at the post office where I worked. He delivered freight there. We had a lot of likenesses. He was from the country, I was from the country. First date, we went to a bar. We struck it off. I mean, we hit it.
I haven't met many women like you that seem like they can keep up with me.
I guess you met your match.
Is that right?
It just went off from there. When I met Elmore, I had already had a daughter, and he cared for her like she was his own.
About 2 years into the relationship, Rochelle became pregnant, and that's where their son Cody came along.
Not long afterwards, the couple found their little slice of heaven.
We bought 5 acres in Del Valley, Texas.
He had every animal on the property that you could name.
We both loved animals. There was no not giving an animal a home. If there's a stray, we pick it up, we take it home.
He was very happy out there.
I felt that Elmore was my soulmate.
By 2010, the couple had been together for 11 years, and the spring of that year marked another special occasion in Elmore's life.
We was planning his 50th birthday. We was going to have like a trail ride birthday party for him. Elmore and I had been talking, and we was going to get back together and talk about it again in a couple of days.
However, Elmore would never get the chance to celebrate his golden birthday. On April 13th, 2010, Austin police have found him dead on the grounds of an apartment complex 15 miles from his country home.
It was clear to them that whatever had killed him wasn't just a fall.
The wound on the front of Mr. Allen's face was consistent with being hit with the butt of a gun.
We were, in fact, investigating a deceased person, a murder investigation.
But who would want to kill a loving father and hardworking rancher like Elmore Allen?
Was he meeting someone here, or was he brought here against his will?
In the spring of 2010, Elmore Allen Jr. was getting ready to celebrate his 50th birthday. The beloved father of 8 had a devoted partner of 11 years, a successful career, and a farm of his own just outside Austin, Texas.
Elmore and I, we had a great life together. It was awesome.
But on the morning of April 13th, Elmore is lying dead at an apartment complex 15 miles north of his rural ranch.
Detectives came to the conclusion that Elmore had been held at gunpoint and that the wounds on his face may have been because he had been hit in the face with the end of the gun.
Mr. Allen had sustained an injury underneath his left eye and had struck the back of his head on a landscaping retaining wall.
It looked like he was murdered, and we felt like there was probably a robbery involved.
His pockets had been pulled out.
His cell phone was missing, his wallet was missing.
As detectives survey the crime scene, they wonder, what was Elmore doing at this apartment complex half an hour away from his country home?
Was he meeting someone here, or was he brought here against his will? Unfortunately, a search of his vehicle did not yield any useful evidence.
When the detectives pulled Elmore's sleeve back, they noticed a wristband.
We felt like that might indicate the location that he was at the previous night, just hours before he was found.
This was a yellow wristband that looked similar to something you'd find after going to a concert or a nightclub.
He's been somewhere.
But the wristband will only get detectives so far.
Even though we had the wristband without any sort of name on the wristband, there's really no place to start. There's hundreds of places in Austin that might issue that type of wristband.
This was going to be like finding a needle in a haystack.
Detectives hope the man who called 911, Caleb Tate, might have seen something else that could aid in their investigation.
Tell us a little bit more about what you witnessed.
Well, it started out just a typical day,
He was leaving for work in the morning, walked to his car and discovered the victim.
Hey, man, you okay? At first, I thought he was just passed out.
He thought the man might have been drunk, but it wasn't until he got closer that he realized this was much worse and ended up calling 911.
Hello? Just please get here quick.
Have you ever seen him around here before?
Not that I can think of.
Caleb tells the detectives that he has no idea who Mr. Allen is. He's never seen him before. He doesn't recognize him.
Thanks, Caleb. Take care.
Hitting a dead end with Caleb, detectives move on to speak with other residents of the apartment complex.
The police canvassed the area, trying to find out if any neighbors had heard anything or seen anything.
One resident mentioned that around 4 a.m. the night before, they had been awoken by what sounded like a man and a woman shouting and door slamming.
Oh, it wasn't the first time they made a racket, so I didn't think too much about it.
That same resident did comment to the police that he's heard disturbances coming from that very same apartment below him previously.
The couple lived in Building 3, right next to where the decedent was found.
Detectives immediately head downstairs to knock on the couple's door, but they're already on their way out.
Hey, good morning.
They were met by Lucas Castro and Monica Guzman.
We're with the Austin Police Department.
We don't have time for this right now. I'm sorry.
While speaking to Mr. Castro and Ms. Guzman, it appears to the police that they're nervous about something.
Immediately, Lucas and Monica tried to leave the scene.
This is regarding a homicide that occurred outside your apartment last night.
A homicide?
But even more concerning is something the detectives notice about Lucas's appearance.
Lucas had a fresh injury to his face.
He appears to have blood on his shirt as well. This couple may know something that they're not saying.
Hours into the murder investigation of Elmore Allen Jr., witnesses have identified 2 residents allegedly involved in a disturbance on the night Elmore died.
Neighbors reported hearing an argument coming from your apartment. We found a body.
No, sir.
When they were asked about the scratch on Lucas's face, they both gave a very similar sounding answer.
You just got into a little tiff last night, right, babe?
Yeah, nothing serious.
Lucas and Monica lived together. They were in a dating relationship, and they were in some sort of a fight that did turn physical.
I work nights, and I didn't get home until 3 a.m. We started arguing. He said something, and I got mad.
The couple admits their fight escalated.
They were raising their voice and slamming doors. Monica had gotten physical towards Lucas, scratching his face and pushing him into the TV stand.
Uh-huh. Was anyone else there?
No.
Their version of events was that this was a domestic dispute between two people. They didn't know Elmore. They didn't have anything to do with his death.
You mind if we take a look in your apartment?
Upon further investigation, detectives believe the couple is telling the truth.
They allowed us to search their apartment to look for any sort of evidence that might be related. And it was pretty obvious that their disturbance was probably not related to the victim.
With all leads at the apartment complex exhausted, detectives head to the address they found for Elmore.
Myself and Detective Fugit drove to that residence to talk to next of kin, who was his common-law wife at the time.
When they told me that they found Elmore dead, it was a shock, unbelievable. I didn't know what to say. What do you mean?
How could this happen?
The first thing that came to my mind was my son. How am I going to tell my son that his dad is not coming home tonight?
So sorry, ma'am. We're going to do everything we can to find out who did this.
When we talked to her, it was a hard conversation, obviously, because she had just been notified of his death.
I remember asking, where was he at? And they told me they found him at these apartments. Did I have any knowledge of him knowing anyone that lived there? And I didn't.
According to Rochelle, after 11 years together, she and Elmore hit a rough patch.
He really loved women, and I knew it. He messed around or cheated. He had a lot of other women that I would find out about, and that was very hurtful.
How long has this been going on?
The past few years.
I worked the day and he worked the evenings. We were crossing paths. And it was like we were just kind of like growing apart.
But Rochelle tells detectives she still cared deeply for Elmore and hoped he would change.
I know that Elmore loved me and I know he loved his family. And in a way, I thought it would all come back together.
When was the last time you saw Elmore?
Yesterday morning. When he didn't come home last night, I started blowing his phone up.
They asked me, did I know where Elmore would go out?
He sometimes would go to the club up in Austin.
Do you know which specific clubs?
I don't. I'm sorry.
I could not help them in telling them where Elmore was at. And I said the person that would probably know would be his best friend, Jesse.
His friend Jesse? I have his number.
Detectives are quick to follow up with Elmore's friend.
Hi, is this Jesse?
Unfortunately, we had to break the news to him that his friend was deceased. He was not aware of exactly where Mr. Allen was the night before, but he told us that Mr. Allen would visit the various strip clubs in the East Austin area, and he named 2 different specific strip clubs that he would visit. And so we went to go look at those places.
As detectives make the drive back up to Austin, news of Elmore's death spreads to the rest of his family.
The sheriff came to me and said, Miss Phillip, we found your brother this morning and he is deceased. And I couldn't hardly believe that. I had to ask her again, what did you say?
My sister Pam called me and she asked me, was I sitting down? And she said, Elmore's dead. And I say, what? What do you mean he's dead? I was just talking to him.
Back in Austin, detectives visit the first strip club on their list.
The first club that the detectives visited, they were able to speak with the staff. However, they said they didn't remember anyone by Elmore's description being there that night.
Investigators have much more luck at their next stop, a gentleman's club called Hot Bodies.
After talking to the manager, he identified the bracelet pretty quick and said, yes, that's absolutely our bracelet, and we used it last night.
Do you recognize this man?
Yeah, that's Elmore.
He immediately recognized him as a a normal customer that would come in, and corroborated that he had seen him there on Monday evening.
The manager says Elmore arrived at the club around 11 p.m.
Mr. Allen was flashing cash around the strip club and buying lots of drinks, was buying dances.
He was in really high spirits and sharing that he had just cashed a big check from work.
Apparently was intoxicated.
Do you all have surveillance footage from last night we could look at?
Oh, yeah, sure do. Want to take a look at it?
Absolutely.
Sure, let's do it.
Fortunately, Hot Bodies had surveillance footage of the parking lot area, and we were able to see Mr. Allen leave in his work truck, the same work truck that we found at the crime scene.
But from the looks of the footage, Elmore didn't leave alone.
There was a female that walked out behind him and got into the passenger seat, and they drove off together.
Whoever the woman was who he was leaving with may have something to do with the murder.
Detectives investigating the murder of Elmore Allen Jr. have just discovered surveillance footage showing their victim leaving an Austin area strip club with a young woman on the night he died.
Do you know who that woman is?
Right there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's Sin.
The manager was able to look at this footage and immediately identify the dancer as a stage name Sin.
Her real name is Jessica. She's one of our most popular dancers.
When they continued to look over the various footage from that evening, detectives also noticed some interesting footage from inside the club of the same dancer.
On the CCTV footage, detectives witnessed the woman taking a phone call before leaving the club with Elmore and getting into his truck.
Who was she calling?
Good luck.
After wrapping up their interview with the strip club manager, detectives run a background check on 20-year-old Jessica Krause Patterson, a.k.a. Sin.
What was curious is we were able to see that just a few months before, she was involved in some sort of a disturbance and got a ride home from one of our victim services counselors. And the location that she told that counselor to take her home to was the exact same location where our crime scene was, where Mr. Allen was found.
That's not the only shocking coincidence.
The apartment that she went to was Caleb's apartment. That's where she was staying.
Caleb Tate was the resident who called 911 and had given the tip about Elmore being found at the scene.
Have you ever seen him around here before?
Not that I can think of.
So when we saw the connection to Caleb Tate, I think it's pretty obvious that we needed to have a follow-up conversation with him.
Thanks for coming in, Caleb.
Of course.
We wanted to talk to you about Jessica Krause Patterson.
Caleb admits, yeah, he does know Jessica.
He was actually a former boyfriend as well as a former roommate.
We know Jessica was with the man who was killed outside your apartment the other night.
What?
Do you want to tell us anything about that?
Detectives feel like there's no way that this is just a coincidence.
But Caleb insists that it is.
I don't know anything about that, I swear.
When Caleb realized that he could potentially be involved, as a suspect in a murder investigation, he was pretty cooperative with us. He told us Jessica did live with him a few months prior.
So she's not staying with you anymore?
No. She's kicking it with another guy now, JT Banks.
One of the things that he told us is that he had overheard a conversation between Jessica and her boyfriend, JT, where they planned on robbing somebody.
And so this is an obvious red flag to detectives.
It sounded very, very similar to what we might be investigating.
The fact that Caleb is Jessica's only known tie to the location where Elmore was killed still gives detectives pause, but they decide to let him go for the time being.
Thanks, Caleb. We'll be in touch. You're free to go.
Police found nothing else to connect him to Elmore's death. So at this point, they shifted their focus to Jessica and JT.
So we did bring Jessica to the police department consensually, and JT was with her when we found her, and he came along. So We split up. I interviewed Jessica, and Detective Fugit interviewed JT.
Jessica tells Detective Greenwald she hasn't been working at Hot Body Strip Club for long.
I'm starting. I've been out of school for a little bit and thought that I was going to get rich, dancing or something.
But Detective Greenwald keeps the small talk short.
Okay. Do you know why you're here?
No.
You have no idea?
No.
If you had to guess, what would you think? Here's the thing is, investigating a pretty serious incident, okay? We're investigating the death that occurred on Bluff Springs a couple nights ago.
Okay.
This is your opportunity to tell me everything that happened, to be cooperative with this investigation.
The first time that we interviewed Jessica, she did explain to us that when Hot Bodies closed that night, she got a ride from one of her customers, and she described Mr. Elmer Allen perfectly. Described his truck and said that she got into the passenger side of the truck so that he could give her a ride home.
He said he was going the same way as me. I was going to say that.
But a few miles down the road, Jessica claims Elmore started coming on to her.
He tried to feel me up. He had tried to fill me up earlier, too, but I told him to stop.
She said that she got out of the car near a McDonald's because Mr. Allen was making sexual advancements that she wasn't comfortable with.
According to Jessica, JT and his brother Larry picked her up in Larry's white sedan.
Where'd y'all go after that?
Straight home. Sleep.
She said that they went back to the home that JT shared with his brother Larry and where Jessica had also been staying.
She sticks to that story and that she had no idea what had happened to Mr. Allen.
Over in the other interrogation room, JT shares a similar story, but with one key difference.
Where'd you pick her up from? Right there, little street right there in front of Hot Bodies.
He did not mention anything about her having been in a customer's car or going to a McDonald's to pick her up.
Jessica tell you who she left with Monday night? No. She left with me. Yeah, she left with that guy right there.
When you're faced with that situation where you've got people telling very different stories, it raises red flags, right?
This tells a seasoned detective that they're talking to the right people.
It was pretty obvious they were hiding intimate details of what happened that night.
In April of 2010, Austin police are interviewing 20-year-old Jessica Krause Patterson and her 23-year-old boyfriend, JT Banks, about the night Elmore Allen Jr. was killed in a suspected robbery.
He was trying to, heal me and stuff, so I had him pull over, and I called JT, and JT came and got me.
But the couple's stories aren't matching up.
She got in that guy's vehicle and she left with that guy right there. For what? Well, you tell me. You said you went and picked her up at 2.
JT continued to insist that Jessica left work with him that night and not Elmore. And he said that he had no knowledge of what happened to Elmore later that night.
No, I don't know nothing that's going on.
That's when detectives decide to try a new tactic with both suspects.
If they did kill Elmore, maybe they didn't mean to.
We talked to them about the difference between a murder where somebody's intentionally trying to kill somebody and a murder where they may have just been trying to rob somebody and somebody accidentally died.
Did you want for him to die?
Oh my God, no, what are you talking about?
Unfortunately, detectives are still getting nowhere with Jessica and JT.
Jessica got really, really nervous at this point and got emotional, and then she terminated the interview.
You said this was voluntary, right?
It's completely voluntary.
So I can leave?
If you want to.
Okay, I'd like to go.
Okay.
JT follows her lead, leaving detectives with no choice but to let them walk.
We didn't have enough probable cause to issue warrants for their arrest.
However, police are able to confiscate the couple's cell phones. And in reviewing the contents of the phones, investigators make some eye-opening discoveries.
How the events played out became crystal clear once we got those digital pieces of evidence back and compared them with the surveillance video.
The young lady was texting her boyfriend, letting them know that Elmore has money on him.
They talk about, "Are you here yet? Hurry up." They refer to Mr. Allen.
On the surveillance video, before she left the club with Elmore, you could see that Jessica made a call.
We find out that through the phone records that she's actually calling JT, obviously preparing JT to go to the apartment complex and lie in wait for them to arrive.
But that's not the only evidence detectives find in Jessica's cell phone data.
The next morning, Jessica's taken a picture of at least $700 or so and then bragging to her friends about how much money she made the previous night.
Detectives followed up with the manager at Hot Bodies, and he said that there was no way that she could have made that type of money working at the club, especially on a Monday night.
At that point in time, we felt like we had enough probable cause to arrest Jessica.
On April 30th, detectives take Jessica back into custody and confront her with everything they've learned.
We've got the phone records back. It's all fitting together like a nice, neat puzzle.
But even in the face of the evidence, Jessica continues to deny and deflect.
Whose idea was it?
There was no idea. I didn't do anything.
Well, who did? If it wasn't
Nobody
you.
did.
She basically reiterated the first story that she told us.
He just needs someone to blame. I work hard for my money. I did. I work my ass off when I work.
She denied having arrived there. She denied having been there that night and claimed that they didn't rob anybody.
You have to tell me how it really went down. Are you willing to tell me?
Unfortunately for detectives, Jessica completely shuts down.
We were really unable to get any additional information from her.
But before circling back around to JT, detectives turn their attention to his younger brother, Larry.
Hey, I found the child, Jeff Rainwall.
We know from talking to JT and Jessica that he was the one who drove JT over to pick up Jessica the night of the murder.
Police tell him this is his chance to come clean, and that if he doesn't want to be charged with an accessory to murder, he needs to come forward with absolutely everything that he knows.
You know the night that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
This time, detectives are in luck.
He was willing to exchange information about what happened.
I'm gonna be straight up real with you. I'm not trying to get in trouble, but man.
You're stuck in a bad place.
Yeah.
Texas detectives investigating the tragic death of 49-year-old Elmore Allen Jr. believe local dancer Jessica Krause Patterson and her boyfriend JT Banks are behind the crime.
Police had surveillance footage and phone records from that night to support their theory.
And now they're gathering an eyewitness account from JT's brother, Larry.
I'm gonna be straight up real with you. I'm not trying to get in trouble, but man.
You're stuck in a bad place.
Yeah.
JT told police that his brother Larry drove him over to the strip club to pick up Jessica at about 2 a.m. But Larry denied that version of events.
He said he didn't even know where Hot Bodies was and did not drive JT to go pick up Jessica that night.
According to Larry, JT did ask him for a ride, but not to the strip club.
So my brother was like, well, take me over here to these apartments. I'm like, why? Because supposedly Jessica left with some dude.
They went to Jessica's old apartment complex, which is exactly where the crime scene was. He described driving there with JT. He said that he parked and JT got out of the car.
And he was like, I'll be right back. So I parked the car and he went to go get Jessica. And in about 3-4 minutes, I get 5 tops. They came back.
According to Larry, nothing seemed off at first.
She was happy. He was happy.
But JT handed something to Jessica. It was something in a baggie.
I asked her what it was. She's like, nah, nothing. It's just trash.
On the car ride home, JT asked Larry to pull over.
So he opened his dumpster and threw something in the trash. Then after that, we just went to the house.
We feel like that was probably Mr. Allen's cell phone and his wallet after they had removed the cash.
Investigators feel like they can trust what Larry is telling them.
Catch you in any lies, you're involved. You understand?
We really didn't feel like he was a planner or profited from this particular robbery and murder. And we felt like he was being used by JT in the whole situation as just somebody to give them a ride.
After speaking with Larry, police charged JT Banks and Jessica Krause Patterson with first-degree felony murder.
We feel like they knowingly and intentionally committed a violent crime in that they robbed Elmore Allen, they struck him in the face, and because of their actions during that felony, he died.
On June 7th, 2011, a little more than a year after Elmore's death, the defendant's trial gets underway.
Jessica and JT are actually tried together.
Prosecutors argue that Jessica set her eyes on Elmore as a target the moment he walked into the club. Elmore was intoxicated and was flashing his cash.
He had got paid shortly before that, and he had a lot of money on him.
That money obviously drew the attention of Mrs. Krause Patterson.
Do you think you could give me a ride home?
Yeah. Let's get out of here.
Okay, let me go get changed.
You do that.
This whole thing was a setup.
Prosecutors believe that Jessica led Elmore to drive to the apartment complex and that secretly she was coordinating with JT to rob him.
And when they got to the complex, JT stepped forward with a gun.
Empty your pockets now. Whoa, now, whoa.
He forced Elmore to give over his money, even though he cooperated. JT still struck him with the gun and pistol whipped him.
Let's go.
The blow to the face caused Elmore to lose balance, and he had a hard landing.
And it did, in fact, cause his death.
In a shocking move, JT and Jessica's attorneys admit that they killed Elmore, but they claim the couple acted in self-defense.
The defense raised the question of a potential sexual assault that was happening and that maybe JT, came to her aid and rescue, but it really didn't explain the text messages where they planned and coordinated the joint arrival at the apartment complex. I think it just confused the jury.
The defense attorneys did a pretty good job of breaking down the character of my brother, Elmore, because of his lifestyle, with a lot of women. I was disappointed.
The defense team's efforts are enough to thwart the prosecution's case.
Ultimately, the jury in that case just couldn't reach a verdict, and they hung, and a mistrial was declared.
The disappointment was there when they was not convicted. Immediately, we wanted to do a retrial.
I was just totally distraught. I couldn't believe it. I thought we had it in the bag.
Prosecutors remain determined to achieve justice for Elmore and his family. So to bolster their case against JT, they decide to make Jessica an offer.
In exchange for her testimony and filling in the gaps about everything that happened, she would receive a 5-year sentence in prison for her involvement.
Now, Jessica decides her freedom is more important than her relationship with her boyfriend.
She took the deal and agreed to testify against JT.
I was okay with the plea deal that they gave Jessica. For her to tell what really happened was a relief. It almost brought closure.
When JT's retrial begins, Jessica is the prosecution's star witness.
She acknowledged it. She acknowledged what she had did.
Jessica finally admitted, yes, we lured Elmore to those apartments. Yes, we robbed him. And yes, we killed him.
Thanks to Jessica's testimony, the prosecution finally gets a win in their case against JT.
This method proved to be successful for the prosecution. And this go around, they were able to get a guilty verdict for JT and a sentence of 23 years.
I was very happy with that, and my family was happy with that.
During the impact statement, the attorney might have said something at the point that JT did feel bad about what he said, but I was able to give my part of the impact statement, and I let him know that, hey, you didn't only take my brother, but you took a father, a grandfather. And I told him, I says, we forgive you because we come from a Christian family, but I don't think you've seen the wrath of God yet.
While Elmore's family has found it in their hearts to forgive, they'll never forget the man that brought so much joy to their lives.
There's not a day that we don't think about him and miss him.
My baby brother, Elmore Allen Jr., Nuki Boy, was a wonderful man.
My happiest times were with Elmore and the things that we did. He did leave good memories, a lifetime of great memories.
Phase, claiming that Tanisha had attacked him with a knife and that he had acted in self-defense, blacking out during the struggle. When cross-examined about his actions following her death, he admitted to dismembering her remains and placing them in a smoker to destroy the evidence. This revelation solidified the jury's decision. Timothy Shepard was found guilty of murder and received the maximum sentence of 99 years in prison, ensuring he would no longer pose a danger to others while providing a somber sense of closure to a family that had endured unimaginable grief. Part 2: The Tangled Web of Obsession. The study of homicide investigations frequently reveals that the most violent acts are often committed by individuals driven by deeply personal, internal conflicts. On the cold winter morning of Wednesday, January 30th, 2008, at approximately 7:30 in the morning, motorists traveling along Interstate 540 in Raleigh, North Carolina, noticed what appeared to be a person lying in the grass beside the highway. Emergency personnel quickly arrived and confirmed that the young woman was deceased. The initial assumption that she might have been a pedestrian involved in a vehicular accident was rapidly dismissed when investigators observed that she had suffered multiple sharp force injuries to her face, neck, and torso. Among the commuters traveling on the interstate that morning was Darren Curtis. Observing the active crime scene and the blue tarp covering the victim, Darren continued his drive only to discover his wife's white sedan parked on the shoulder of the highway approximately half a mile further down the road. Filled with sudden apprehension, he returned to the scene, where law enforcement officers eventually confirmed his worst fears. The deceased young woman was his 21-year-old wife, Latrice Curtis, a dedicated business administration student at North Carolina Central University. The medical examiner's report detailed the extreme violence of the assault, noting that Latrice had been stabbed upwards of 40 times. Her carotid artery and jugular vein had been severed, and she had sustained numerous defensive injuries to her hands, indicating that she had struggled courageously against her attacker. The presence of her personal jewelry ruled out robbery as a primary motive. Instead, the sheer number of wounds pointed to an intense personal anger on the part of the perpetrator. A crucial piece of physical evidence was recovered during the post-mortem examination, a contraceptive device that indicated recent intimate activity, though there were no physical signs of involuntary sexual assault. To understand the circumstances surrounding her death, detectives subpoenaed the telephone records of both Latrice and Darren. The records confirmed Darren's account of his communications with his wife on the evening of January 29, 2008. He explained that she had called him around 10 o'clock in the evening to state she was running late from her studies and planned to get some food. Darren had fallen asleep around 11:30 in the evening, assuming she had decided to stay at her parents' house and had tried to contact her the following morning before leaving for work at 7:30. However, the telephone records also revealed a significant number of calls exchanged between Latrice's phone and an unfamiliar number around midnight. This number was traced to Stephen Randolph, a prominent student and basketball player at the university who harbored aspirations of playing in the National Basketball Association. Within 2 days of the discovery of Latrice's body, Stephen voluntarily came to the sheriff's office to speak with investigators, accompanied by his housemate, Robert Reeves, a local pastor and influential community figure often referred to as the bishop. During his initial interview, Stephen claimed that his relationship with Latrice was strictly academic. However, when confronted with the forensic findings and telephone logs, he admitted that they had engaged in a secret sexual relationship. He explained that on the night of the murder, Latrice had visited his residence, and during their encounter, a contraceptive device had become dislodged. Unable to retrieve it, Latrice had left around 10 o'clock in the evening, planning to address the issue at home. Stephen stated that he had subsequently driven to the home of his primary girlfriend, Velma Newton, where he remained until approximately 1 o'clock in the morning. He claimed that Latrice had repeatedly called him during this time, expressing anxiety over a potential pregnancy. To verify these statements, detectives interviewed Pastor Robert Reeves, who lived in the same residence as Stephen. The 43-year-old minister confirmed that Latrice had visited Stephen that evening and that he had seen her car outside before leaving for a church service at 8:15 in the evening. He stated that when he returned at 11:30 in the evening, both vehicles were gone. Reeves also mentioned that Stephen had later confided in him about Latrice's late-night phone call, during which she reportedly expressed a desire to elevate their relationship, a prospect that Stephen apparently did not welcome due to his focus on his athletic career. As investigators sought to verify these timelines, they received a critical report from a state trooper who had been patrolling Interstate 540 on the night of the crime. At approximately 1:30 in the morning, the trooper had observed a disabled vehicle with its hazard lights flashing on the eastbound shoulder. Upon running the registration plates, the vehicle was found to belong to Pastor Robert Reeves. The trooper had also noticed a white sedan matching Latrice's vehicle parked on the westbound shoulder opposite the pastor's car, but had been called away to another incident before he could investigate further. This discovery shifted the focus of the investigation toward the pastor. When re-interviewed, Reeves denied having driven his vehicle that night, suggesting instead that Stephen might have borrowed it. However, Stephen denied this, and his girlfriend confirmed that Stephen had been at her residence during the key hours. Furthermore, investigators noticed deep scratches and abrasions on Reeves' arms and hands, which the pastor claimed were the result of an accident while moving a desk with Stephen. Stephen, however, had no recollection of any such accident. As detectives delved deeper into the pastor's background, they uncovered a complex and troubled personal history that contrasted sharply with his public persona. Telephone records revealed that Reeves had been making numerous blocked, anonymous phone calls to Stephen and Velma, attempting to disrupt their relationship. It became increasingly evident that Reeves harbored an intense, possessive obsession with his young roommate and had previously made unwanted sexual advances toward him, which Stephen had rejected. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when the results of the genetic analysis were returned from the crime lab. While Stephen's genetic material was found under Latrice's fingernails, which the prosecution attributed to their intimate encounter earlier that evening, the steering wheel of Latrice's abandoned vehicle contained a mixture of genetic material that belonged directly to Pastor Robert Reeves. On February 2nd, 2008, Robert Reeves was formally arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During his trial in September of 2009, the prosecution presented a compelling case detailing how the pastor's obsessive jealousy towards Stephen had driven him to target Latrice. The prosecution argued that Reeves had followed Latrice from the residence, forced her to pull over on the dark highway, and killed her in a desperate, irrational belief that removing her from Stephen's life would somehow make Stephen more receptive to his own advances. The defense attempted to argue that the genetic material found in the car was the result of passive transfer from the shared residence, and suggested that Stephen had a stronger motive to commit the crime to protect his career from an unwanted pregnancy. However, the jury found the combination of the state trooper's sighting of the pastor's car, the scratches on his arms, his false alibi, and the direct physical evidence to be overwhelming. After 2 days of deliberation on October 9th, 2009, Robert Reeves was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, exposing the tragic consequences of a destructive obsession. Part 3. The fragmented memory of a fatal conflict. The human mind possesses complex mechanisms to cope with extreme trauma, sometimes blocking out the very memories of events that are too devastating to process. On December 11th, 2004, shortly after 4 o'clock in the morning, a hotel manager in Gainesville, Texas, responded to an urgent request from a guest's room. Upon entering the locked room with the assistance of maintenance staff, they discovered a woman lying on the floor in a severely disoriented and injured state. She had sustained a gunshot wound to her head, and a .25 caliber handgun lay near her on the floor. Emergency. Medical technicians rushed her to a trauma center where she survived her life-threatening injuries, but was left with permanent physical and cognitive impairments. The injured woman was identified as Denise Miller, who, along with her boyfriend, police officer Wayne Irby, had been reported missing from the nearby town of Little Elm, Texas, just 24 hours earlier.
Wayne A.,
37-year-old, 6-year veteran of the Little Elm Police Department, had failed to report for his scheduled 6 o'clock in the morning shift on December 10th, 2004, immediately raising alarms among his colleagues who knew him to be exceptionally punctual and dedicated to his duties. A welfare check at the residence Denise shared with her 2 teenage children revealed that neither adult had been seen since the previous day. Denise's daughter recalled receiving a brief, unusual phone call from her mother around midnight, in which Denise expressed her love and instructed her children to prepare themselves for school the next morning. Concerned for their colleagues' safety, 2 officers visited a rental home that Wayne had recently maintained during a brief separation from Denise. Upon entering the residence, they discovered Wayne's mobile phone and personal bag on the kitchen counter, and further down the hallway, they found Wayne deceased on the floor, having sustained a single gunshot wound to the back of his head. The initial investigation focused on determining whether Wayne's death was related to his work as a police officer, but his colleagues described him as an exceptionally popular and friendly individual who lacked professional enemies. However, as detectives interviewed friends and acquaintances, they uncovered a history of significant trust issues and jealousy within the couple's relationship. Denise had frequently accused Wayne of infidelity, a tension that had previously resulted in a physical altercation in December of 2003, which led to a brief separation, although they had reconciled in November of 2004 after Denise lost her employment. Friends indicated that Wayne had recently decided to end the relationship permanently, planning to move out of their shared home. Inside the couple's primary residence, investigators discovered a handwritten note from Denise expressing deep despair on the kitchen counter of Wayne's rental home. They found another note in which Denise apologized for taking both of their lives and requested that their families be contacted in her hotel room. In Gainesville, investigators discovered a third, more extensive letter, which contained a line suggesting that she had accidentally shot Wayne, panicked, and fled the scene. They also found Wayne's .40 caliber service weapon, which Denise had apparently tried to load with a cartridge inserted backward, causing the weapon to jam and prompting her to use the .25 caliber handgun instead. When a Texas Ranger interviewed Denise at her hospital bedside, she exhibited severe cognitive deficits, claiming to have no memory of the shooting or her subsequent suicide attempt. Neurological experts note that the physical trauma of a bullet wound to the brain, combined with the psychological impact of a highly distressing event, can result in genuine amnesia, leaving the individual unable to recall the critical moments of the incident. Despite her memory loss and physical limitations, including partial paralysis and visual impairment, Denise was charged with first-degree murder. Her trial commenced in July of 2006. The defense faced the significant task of explaining her actions, arguing that the shooting had been a tragic accident, highlighting the line in her hotel note, and suggesting that her lack of intent was evidenced by her highly distressed state. However, the prosecution presented forensic evidence from the state crime lab demonstrating that the .25 caliber handgun required 4.5 to 5 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger, making an accidental discharge highly improbable. Furthermore, the fact that Wayne had been shot in the back of the head and that Denise had failed to summon medical assistance, choosing instead to flee and write notes, strongly supported the prosecution's argument of a deliberate act born of jealousy. The jury rejected the theory of an accident, finding Denise guilty of murder. While some observers wondered if her physical disability would elicit leniency. During the sentencing phase, the jury sentenced her to 62 years in prison, reflecting the gravity of the loss of Officer Wayne Irby. Conclusion: when we reflect on these three cases, we are reminded of the profound impact of domestic conflict and personal obsession on families and communities. The meticulous work of the investigators, forensic scientists, and legal professionals who resolved these complex cases highlights the enduring pursuit of justice. By analyzing the psychological vulnerabilities that lead to such tragic outcomes, we gain a deeper understanding of the importance of community awareness, support networks, and early intervention in domestic relationships, ensuring that the memory of those lost continues to inspire the triumph of good over evil. The human mind is a complex labyrinth, often balancing between deep affection and a dangerous desire for control. In the study of criminal psychology, we frequently observe that the most tragic acts of violence do not originate from external threats, but from within the very relationships that promise safety and devotion. When the fragile boundaries of love are replaced by possessiveness, jealousy, or a desperate need to maintain a false self-image, the consequences can be devastating. Through the careful examination of three distinct cases, we can observe how dedicated investigators, forensic specialists, and community members work together to uncover the truth behind sudden disappearances and senseless acts of violence. By analyzing these events through a psychological lens, we gain a deeper understanding of the warning signs of obsessive behavior and the enduring power of justice. The case of Tanisha Stewart and Timothy Shepard. In the spring of 2007, a sense of quiet dread settled over a neighborhood north of Houston, Texas. On Wednesday, March 21st of that year, investigator Sidney Miller and his partner drove down a highway, guided by two passengers in the back seat of their vehicle. The passengers were directing the detectives to an apartment complex, hoping to find some trace of a 19-year-old college freshman named Tanisha Stewart, who had been missing since March 15th. Upon arriving at the designated parking lot, one of the passengers pointed toward a large dumpster in the back of the complex, fearing what they might find, the investigators peered inside, only to find the container completely empty. There were no obvious human remains, no immediate clues, and no clear answers. It was a frustrating moment in an investigation that was rapidly turning into a complex puzzle of betrayal, jealousy, and hidden anger. To understand how a young woman with a promising future could vanish so suddenly, investigators had to look back at her life and her relationships. Tanisha Stewart was known by her family and friends as someone exceptional. Raised in one of the more challenging neighborhoods of Houston, she had experienced hardship early in life, including the loss of her father at a young age. Despite these difficulties, she remained focused on her education, devoting herself to her studies and earning a scholarship to Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. Tanisha was described as a bright, personable young woman with an infectious smile, which naturally drew people to her. In May 2005, while working at a local pizza restaurant, she met Timothy Shepard, a coworker who was 25 years old at the time. Despite an 8-year age difference, 17-year-old Tanisha was drawn to Timothy, who presented himself as someone mature and supportive. Over time, their working relationship transitioned into a serious romance. Tanisha's family initially questioned Timothy's motives, wondering why an older man was dating a teenage girl. To ease their concerns, Timothy made a conscious effort to win over her relatives. He spent time at her mother's home, offered to fix appliances, and assisted with computers, eventually earning their trust and being embraced like a member of the family. The dynamics of the relationship began to shift, however, when Tanisha left Houston to attend university. The physical distance of nearly 2 hours created a natural separation, allowing Tanisha to experience a new level of personal independence. For Timothy, this transition appeared to trigger deep-seated insecurities. Approximately 3 months into her first semester, Timothy briefly ended the relationship to reconcile with a former girlfriend, only to realize he had made what he considered a mistake. He traveled to the university campus to surprise Tanisha, and they resumed dating. But the relationship was no longer the same. Tanisha was growing, meeting new people, and focusing on her future, while Timothy's behavior became increasingly possessive. Psychological analysis of such dynamics often reveals that when one partner gains independence, the controlling partner may perceive this growth as a direct threat to their authority and self-worth. When Tanisha returned home for spring break in March 2007, she planned to spend time with her friends and attend a concert. Timothy's frustration with her independence became evident when he questioned why she was setting up appointments just to see him. Her sister, Gayla Taylor, recalled having a troubling premonition during this time, a nightmare that her sister was in danger, though Tanisha gently reassured her that everything would be fine. On Sunday, March 18, 2007, Gayla received a phone call from her mother, who was deeply concerned because no one had heard from Tanisha. She had failed to attend the concert she was looking forward to, and her mobile phone went unanswered. As 36 hours passed without any word, the family filed a missing persons report on Monday, March 19th. Investigators quickly identified Timothy Shepard as one of the last people to see Tanisha alive and invited him to the police station for questioning. Timothy claimed that he had picked Tanisha up early on Thursday morning, around 3 o'clock. According to his account, while they were in his vehicle, Tanisha received an early morning telephone call from a college friend named Mark Marks. Timothy admitted this call upset him, and when they arrived at his apartment, a confrontation ensued. Timothy told detectives that Tanisha refused to discuss the call and walked out of his apartment later that morning, leaving on foot. He maintained that he had no idea where she went, although investigators questioned him extensively. Timothy did not deviate from his story. He even provided voluntary written consent for the police to search his apartment. The initial search of the apartment did not yield any immediate physical evidence of a struggle or a crime. With no legal grounds to detain him, investigators returned his keys and allowed him to leave, while they turned their attention to other possibilities, including Mark Marks. When detectives interviewed Mark, they learned that he and Tanisha had been dating for about a month. Mark was aware of Timothy, and though he disliked sharing Tanisha's affection, he understood she was still trying to resolve her past relationship. Mark stated that he had last seen Tanisha around 3 o'clock on Thursday morning when he dropped her off. He denied any involvement in her disappearance and provided a verified alibi, proving he was at a social gathering with friends on South Padre Island at the time she vanished. With both Timothy and Mark seemingly cleared, investigators faced the distressing possibility that Tanisha had been abducted by a stranger after leaving Timothy's apartment. Search teams, K-9 units, and community volunteers combed the wooded areas near the complex, but found no traces of her. However, as the search continued, neighbors at the apartment complex began reporting highly unusual behavior from Timothy Shepard. Several residents noted that on the Friday following Tanisha's disappearance, Timothy spent the entire weekend continuously operating 2 outdoor grills. The smoke was so intense that neighbors had called the emergency services, fearing a fire. When first responders arrived, Timothy claimed he was preparing food for an upcoming church picnic of approximately 150 to 200 people. Firefighters noted seeing what appeared to be raw meat in a bathtub filled with water, which seemed consistent with his explanation. Additionally, a neighbor reported seeing Timothy pouring an excessive amount of bleach on his patio, so strong that the fumes burned her eyes. This combination of suspicious behaviors caused investigators to reevaluate Timothy as a primary suspect. The physical evidence of extensive cleaning and the intense, continuous use of the grill suggested a desperate attempt to destroy evidence. As pressure mounted, Tanisha's family reached out to community activist Quan Nell X to assist in finding answers. Quan Nell X, who had been contacted by Timothy's family to ensure a fair interaction with law enforcement, arranged a private meeting with Timothy at his apartment. During their conversation, which took place in the bathroom due to Timothy's paranoia about surveillance, the emotional weight of the situation became apparent. When asked directly if he had harmed Tanisha, Timothy's demeanor changed. He confessed to Quanell X that during their argument about Marks, he had entered a rage, attacked Tanisha as she attempted to leave, and strangled her to death. He claimed he then placed her body in the apartment complex dumpster. Quanell X immediately communicated this confession to investigator Sydney Miller. However, when authorities arrived at the dumpster, they discovered it had been emptied. The waste had already been transported to a massive regional landfill. Investigators estimated that a thorough search of the landfill would cost over $500,000 and offer a very low probability of success. In a painful decision, Tanisha's family requested that the county not exhaust its resources on a potentially futile search. Following his arrest, Timothy exercised his right to legal counsel and refused to speak further. To secure a conviction without a body, investigators needed physical evidence. A specialized forensic team conducted a meticulous search of Timothy's apartment. Inside the kitchen garbage disposal, crime scene investigators discovered microscopic bone fragments and a small piece of tooth enamel, which was later matched to Tanisha. Near the outdoor grill, they also recovered charred bone fragments. While the charred pieces were too degraded for a definitive identification, the presence of the tooth enamel in the disposal provided a powerful piece of forensic evidence. The state presented its case in September 2008. The prosecution argued that Timothy, driven by a desire for control and unable to accept Tanisha's growing independence, had taken her life and attempted to destroy the evidence of his crime using the apartment appliances and outdoor grills to demonstrate premeditation and a history of controlling behavior. The prosecution called Timothy's cousin, Nicholas Shepard, to the stand. Nicholas testified that Timothy had previously threatened that if Tanisha ever left him, he would dismember her and boil her remains. This testimony shocked the courtroom and provided critical insight into the suspect's mindset. During the sentencing phase, Timothy chose to testify, claiming he had acted in self-defense. He asserted that Tanisha had attacked him with a knife and that he had blacked out during the struggle, remembering nothing until he realized she was no longer breathing. To support this claim, the defense presented photographs of minor cuts on Timothy's hands from the night of his arrest. However, the prosecution challenged this narrative by questioning Timothy about his actions after her death. When asked if he had placed her remains on a barbecue pit, Timothy corrected the prosecutor, stating he had used a smoker. This clinical, detached response deeply affected the jury. The jury rejected the claim of self-defense, upholding the guilty verdict for murder. Timothy Shepard was sentenced to 99 years in prison, ensuring he would no longer pose a threat to others. For Tanisha's family, the sentence offered a solemn resolution to a tragic chapter, allowing them to honor her memory, and her legacy of academic ambition. The case of Latrice Curtis and Robert Reeves. In the early morning of Wednesday, January 30th, 2008, commuters traveling along Interstate 540 in Raleigh, North Carolina, made a tragic discovery. Alongside the busy highway lay the body of a young woman. First responders quickly determined that she had not been the victim of a traffic accident. She had been stabbed repeatedly. The victim was identified as 21-year-old Latrice Curtis, a student at North Carolina Central University. Her husband, Darren Curtis, had passed the crime scene on his way to work and recognized her white vehicle parked half a mile down the road. Distraught, he returned to the scene, where detectives confirmed his fears. Latrice Curtis was described as a vibrant, popular young woman who valued her education and had a promising future in business administration. She had met Darren, an accounting student and former National Guard soldier, during her first semester of college. The two fell in love and were married in April 2007, moving into a cozy apartment to begin their lives together. The brutality of the crime scene suggested a deeply personal attack. Latrice had suffered upwards of 40 stab wounds to her face, neck, and torso. Forensic investigators noted that her hands showed defensive wounds, indicating she had fought desperately for her life. Inside her abandoned vehicle, investigators found signs of a struggle, including a broken center console and trace amounts of blood on the driver's side door. A DNA sample was recovered from the steering wheel, which was sent to the state crime lab for analysis. During initial questioning, Darren Curtis explained that he last spoke to his wife around 10 o'clock on the evening of January 29th. She had called to say she was running late from her classes and planned to get something to eat. Darren went to sleep around 11:30, assuming she might have decided to stay at her parents' house. When he woke the next morning, he tried calling her, but the calls went straight to voicemail. An examination of Darren's hands and arms showed no signs of physical conflict, and a search of his home and vehicle yielded no evidence linking him to the crime. However, the autopsy of Latrice Curtis revealed a significant piece of evidence. A condom was recovered from her body, showing no signs of physical trauma associated with a sexual assault. This suggested she had engaged in consensual sexual activity shortly before her death. To identify her recent contacts, investigators subpoenaed her mobile phone records. The logs revealed a flurry of late-night calls between Latrice and a number belonging to Stephen Randolph, a well-known student and basketball player at her university. On February 1st, 2008, Stephen Randolph arrived at the sheriff's office to speak with detectives. He was accompanied by his roommate, Robert Reeves, a prominent local pastor often referred to as the bishop in the community. Stephen initially stated that he and Latrice were merely classmates who occasionally studied together. However, when presented with the telephone records and the autopsy findings, Stephen admitted they were involved in a consensual affair. He explained that on the night of January 29th, Latrice had visited the basement apartment he rented from Pastor Reeves. During their encounter, a condom had become trapped, and they were unable to retrieve it. Latrice left his residence around 10 o'clock, planning to address the issue. At home, Stephen claimed that after she left, he drove to the home of his girlfriend, Velma Newton, where he stayed until approximately 1 o'clock in the morning. He stated that during this time, Latrice called him repeatedly, expressing concern about the trapped condom and the possibility of pregnancy. Stephen denied any involvement in her murder. To verify this timeline, investigators interviewed Pastor Robert Reeves. Reeves confirmed that Latrice had visited Stephen that evening. He stated that he had left the house at 8:15 to attend a church service and returned around 11:30, noting that both Stephen's and Latrice's vehicles were gone. Reeves also mentioned that Stephen had a collection of swords and knives in the home, which raised concerns for investigators given the nature of Latrice's injuries. A search of the residence, however, did not locate any weapons matching the forensic profile of the murder weapon. As detectives continued their investigation, they attempted to verify the alibis of those involved. When they interviewed Stephen's girlfriend, Velma Newton, she confirmed that Stephen had arrived at her apartment around 10 o'clock. She also shared that she and Stephen had recently been subjected to a series of anonymous, threatening phone calls demanding they end their relationship. Additionally, Stephen's car tires had recently been slashed. The breakthrough in the case came from a routine highway patrol report. State Trooper Isaac Cooper contacted detectives to report that at approximately 1:30 on the morning of January 30th, he had observed a disabled vehicle with its hazard lights on parked on the shoulder of Interstate 540 eastbound. Across the highway, on the westbound side, he noticed a white vehicle matching the description of Latrice's car. Before assisting the driver of the eastbound vehicle, Trooper Cooper ran the license plate through dispatch. The vehicle was registered to Pastor Robert Reeves. This discovery placed the pastor's car at the exact location where Latrice's body was found hours before she was discovered. Detectives brought Reeves back for further questioning. When asked why his car was on the highway that night, Reeves denied being there, insisting he had been at home asleep. However, investigators noticed visible scratches and abrasions on Reeves' hands and arms. He claimed he had received the injuries when he and Stephen fell while moving a heavy desk. When detectives asked Stephen about this incident, Stephen stated that no such fall had occurred. Investigators also subpoenaed the pastor's phone records, which revealed that the anonymous, threatening calls to Stephen and Velma had been placed from Reeves' phone using a blocking feature. Furthermore, when the pastor's sister was interviewed, she stated she had attended the church service Reeves claimed to be at, but did not see him there. The final piece of evidence came from the state crime lab. DNA analysis of the samples recovered from Latrice's steering wheel matched Robert Reeves' The psychological profile of Robert Reeves revealed a deeply compartmentalized life. While presenting himself as a respected spiritual leader, he harbored an intense, obsessive infatuation with his young roommate, Stephen. When Stephen engaged in relationships with women, Reeves responded with jealousy, attempting to sabotage those relationships through anonymous threats and vandalism. On the night of January 29th, after witnessing Latrice visit Stephen, Reeves' jealousy apparently escalated. Investigators believe he followed Latrice onto the highway, forced her to pull over, and attacked her in a state of obsessive rage. In September 2009, Robert Reeves stood trial for the murder of Latrice Curtis. The defense argued that Stephen Randolph was a more likely suspect, pointing to the presence of Stephen's DNA under Latrice's fingernails. The prosecution countered that this DNA was the result of their consensual contact earlier that evening, whereas the presence of Reeves' DNA on her steering wheel, combined with the trooper's eyewitness report and the physical injuries on his arms, left no reasonable doubt. On October 9, 2009, the jury found Robert Reeves guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The conviction of a trusted community figure left many in disbelief, but it served as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers of obsessive possessiveness. The case of Wayne Irby and Denise Miller. In the quiet early hours of Saturday, December 11, 2004, the night manager of a hotel in Gainesville, Texas, received a distress call from a guest room. Unable to open the locked door due to a deadbolt, the manager enlisted the help of a maintenance worker to force entry. Inside the darkened room, they found a 44-year-old woman lying on the floor, bleeding from an apparent gunshot wound to her head. Beside her lay a .25 caliber handgun, along with over-the-counter medication and alcohol. The woman, identified as Denise Miller, was conscious but disoriented. She was immediately transported to a regional trauma center in critical condition. The situation became significantly more complex when local authorities realized that Denise Miller and her boyfriend, 37-year-old police officer Wayne Irby, had been reported missing 24 hours earlier. Wayne Irby was a dedicated 6-year veteran of the Little Elm Police Department. On the morning of December 10th, he failed to report for his 6 o'clock shift, which was highly unusual behavior for him. His colleague, Officer Cynthia Medrano, grew concerned when he did not return her calls. Chief Waylon Rhodes dispatched officers to conduct a welfare check at the home. Wayne shared with Denise and her 2 children, Whitney and Walter. No one answered the door, and no vehicles were in the driveway. When investigators interviewed Denise's children, they learned that their mother had not returned home the previous night. Whitney recalled receiving a brief, unusual phone call from her mother around midnight, telling her she was running errands and expressing her love. Concerned for Wayne's safety, his partner, Detective Jerry Walker, and Officer James Wynn went to a rental property Wayne had recently leased across town. Upon Entering the home, they found Wayne's personal items, including his mobile phone and bag on the kitchen counter. In a back hallway, they discovered Wayne Irby. Lying on the floor, he had died from a single gunshot wound to the back of his head. There were no signs of a struggle or forced entry at the scene. Given Wayne's profession, investigators initially considered whether the homicide was work-related. However, his colleagues described him as an approachable, well-liked officer with no known professional adversaries. Attention quickly turned to Denise Miller. A search of the home she shared with Wayne revealed a handwritten note in the master bedroom expressing deep emotional distress and hinting at suicide. Additionally, Wayne's service weapon was missing from its holster. On the kitchen island of Wayne's rental home, investigators found a second note, written by Denise, which read, "I'm sorry I took both of our lives. Please contact our moms." This confession note suggested a planned murder-suicide. To understand the motive behind the tragedy, investigators looked into the couple's relationship history. They discovered a pattern of intense jealousy and instability. In December 2003, Denise had filed a domestic violence complaint against Wayne after finding him at his home with another female acquaintance. The confrontation had turned physical, resulting in minor injuries to both parties. Denise later withdrew the complaint, admitting she had exaggerated the details out of anger. Friends of the couple indicated that Denise struggled with trust issues, frequently calling Wayne's phone when he was on duty. Wayne had recently expressed a desire to end the relationship permanently and was planning to move back into his rental home. Following the discovery of Denise in the Gainesville hotel room, Texas Ranger Tracy Murphy attempted to interview her at the hospital. Denise had survived the gunshot wound but suffered significant cognitive impairment, partial paralysis, and blindness in one eye. During the recorded interview, Denise appeared highly disoriented and claimed to have no memory of the events in Little Elm or her own suicide attempt. When told that Wayne was deceased, she expressed genuine confusion and denial. Neurological experts noted that severe head trauma, combined with the ingestion of alcohol and medication, can result in genuine psychogenic or organic amnesia, where the brain blocks out traumatic memories as a defense mechanism. Despite her memory loss, physical evidence linked Denise to the crime. Ballistics testing confirmed that the bullet recovered from Wayne's had been fired from the .25 caliber handgun found beside Denise in the hotel room. The weapon was registered to her stepfather. Inside the hotel room, investigators also recovered Wayne's .40 caliber service pistol. It had jammed because a bullet had been inserted backward into the chamber, suggesting Denise had initially tried to use Wayne's weapon before turning her stepfather's gun on herself. A third, longer note found in the hotel room contained a line where Denise claimed the shooting of Wayne had been an accident, stating she had panicked and fled. On January 18, 2005, Denise Miller was formally charged with first-degree murder, following 18 months of medical rehabilitation. and physical therapy, she was deemed competent to stand trial. The trial began on July 10, 2006. The defense argued that the shooting was a tragic accident, pointing to her final note as a dying declaration of intent. They suggested that if she had intended to kill Wayne, she would have loaded the weapon fully and fired multiple times. The prosecution countered by presenting forensic evidence regarding the weapon's mechanics. Testing showed that the .25 caliber handgun required approximately 4.5 to 5 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger, making an accidental discharge highly improbable. Furthermore, the single shot was delivered directly to the back of Wayne's head, and Denise's failure to call for medical assistance after the incident contradicted the claim of an accident. On July 12, 2006, the jury found Denise Miller guilty of murder at her sentencing hearing, taking into account her severe physical disabilities resulting from her suicide attempt. The court spared her the death penalty and sentenced her to 62 years in prison. Reflections on criminal psychology and justice. These three cases, though distinct in their locations and details, share common psychological undercurrents. They demonstrate how unresolved insecurities, obsessive jealousy, and the desire to control another individual can erode the moral boundaries that govern human behavior. In the case of Timothy Shepard, we see how an inability to accept a partner's growing independence led to a fatal escalation of violence, followed by a clinical attempt to evade detection. In the case of Robert Reeves, we observe how a deep, unrequited obsession with another person can manifest as externalized rage against anyone perceived as a barrier to that obsession. In the case of Denise Miller, we see the destructive path of pathological jealousy, where the fear of abandonment culminated in a tragic act of violence and a subsequent attempt to end her own life. In each instance, the resolution of these complex cases was made possible through the meticulous work of law enforcement officers, forensic scientists, and alert community members. By examining the physical evidence, verifying timelines, and analyzing behavioral patterns, investigators were able to present clear, logical narratives to the courts, ensuring that those responsible were held accountable. For the families of Tanisha Stewart, Latrice Curtis, and Wayne Irby, the legal outcomes provided a measure of justice, though the loss of their loved ones remains a permanent void. These narratives serve as an educational resource, encouraging communities to remain vigilant, to recognize the early warning signs of obsessive and controlling behavior, and to support the systems of justice that work to protect the vulnerable and honor the memory of the victims. The anatomy of toxic possessiveness and the illusion of control. The human mind is a complex landscape where love and obsession can sometimes become dangerously intertwined. In the realm of criminal psychology, one of the most critical challenges is understanding how relationships that begin with warmth and affection can devolve into control, violence, and tragedy. True. Justice is not merely about identifying the perpetrator and securing a conviction. It is also about honoring the memory of those whose lives were cut short, understanding the psychological undercurrents that led to their demise, and learning how communities can protect their vulnerable members. This analysis examines 3 distinct cases that occurred across the United States of America. Each case represents a different manifestation of toxic control, obsessive projection, and the devastating consequences of pathological jealousy. By looking beneath the surface of these tragedies, we can find the warning signs, understand the meticulous work of the investigators, and appreciate the triumph of justice over darkness. The illusion of ownership and the case of Tanisha Stewart. The city of Houston, Texas, is a sprawling metropolis known for its industry and diversity. Within its tougher neighborhoods, families work tirelessly to build better futures for their children. It was in this environment that Tanisha Stewart grew up. One of 6 children, Tanisha experienced adversity early in life, losing her father when she was very young. Despite the economic hardships and the challenging surroundings, she refused to let her circumstances define her. Tanisha was a remarkably bright, diligent, and focused young woman. She was blessed with a natural warmth, an infectious smile, and a determination that stood out to everyone who knew her. Her family recognized early on that she was destined for great achievements. She applied herself to her studies with absolute seriousness, earning a scholarship to Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. For Tanisha, education was the pathway to a wider world, a way to lift herself and her family to new heights. At the age of 17, while working at a local pizza restaurant, Tanisha met Timothy Shepard, who was 25 years old at the time. Timothy was handsome, articulate, and presented himself as a supportive partner. Despite the 8-year age gap, Tanisha was drawn to him. She valued partners who could challenge her intellectually, and Timothy initially seemed to fit that description. As their relationship developed, Timothy spent significant time with Tanisha's family, helping with household tasks, fixing electronics, and presenting himself as a reliable, protective figure. The family welcomed him, treating him like a brother and a son. However, a fundamental shift occurred when Tanisha transitioned from high school to college. In the fall of 2006, she moved to the university campus, located approximately 2 hours away from Houston. For the first time, Tanisha was experiencing independence, meeting new friends, and expanding her horizons. This growth, which should have been celebrated, triggered a deep insecurity within Timothy. In the study of criminal psychology, this dynamic is frequently observed in possessive personalities. When a partner begins to gain autonomy, the controlling individual experiences a perceived loss of ownership. Timothy's behavior grew increasingly domineering. He would call and harass her, and on several occasions he even drove to the university campus, wandering through the grounds in an attempt to locate her when she did not answer his phone calls. Though the couple broke up briefly, they resumed dating, but the underlying tension remained. In March of 2007, Tanisha returned to Houston for her spring break. She spent time with friends, planning to attend a concert. Her family noticed that she was attempting to establish boundaries with Timothy, who grew increasingly frustrated by her independence. On Thursday, March 15th, 2007, Tanisha disappeared. The alarm was raised when Tanisha failed to attend the concert and did not respond to any attempts at contact. Her family, knowing her reliable nature, immediately sensed that something was wrong. Her sister, Gayla Taylor, had experienced a troubling dream days prior, which magnified her anxiety. After 36 hours of silence, the family filed a missing persons report on Monday, March 19th, 2007. Investigator Sidney Miller and his partner took charge of the case. They knew that in missing persons cases, the first 24 to 48 hours are the most critical. If a person is not located within that window, the probability of a tragic outcome increases significantly. The detectives began by interviewing the individuals who had last seen Tanisha. Among them was Timothy Shepard. When questioned at the police station, Timothy claimed that he had picked Tanisha up at approximately 3 a.m. on Thursday. He stated that while they were driving, she received a phone call from a college friend named Mark Marks. This call had upset Timothy, leading to a confrontation at his apartment. According to Timothy's initial account, Tanisha refused to discuss the matter and walked out of the apartment later that morning, leaving on foot. He claimed that was the last time he saw her. The investigators searched Timothy's apartment with his voluntary consent, but they found no immediate signs of a struggle or foul play. At that stage, they had no physical evidence to detain him, so they returned his keys and allowed him to leave. Detectives then turned their attention to Mark Marks, the 19-year-old college friend who had called Tanisha. Marks was cooperative, explaining that he and Tanisha had been dating for a short period. He stated that Tanisha was preparing to end her relationship with Timothy. Marks provided a solid, verified alibi, proving he was with friends at a holiday destination at the time of her disappearance. He was ruled out as a suspect. With their primary suspects seemingly in the clear, investigators faced the chilling possibility that Tanisha had been abducted by a stranger after leaving Timothy's apartment. They conducted extensive searches of the surrounding wooded areas, utilizing canine units. At one point, a canine unit locked onto a scent in the woods, but it proved to be the remains of a deceased animal, leaving the search at a standstill. Meanwhile, the community was actively mobilizing. Gayla Taylor organized volunteer search parties, knocking on doors and speaking with neighbors near Timothy's apartment complex. It was during these community inquiries that crucial pieces of information began to emerge. Multiple neighbors reported that on the Friday following Tanisha's disappearance, Timothy had been operating two barbecue grills continuously on his patio. The smoke had been so intense that neighbors had feared a fire and called the emergency services. Furthermore, another resident reported seeing Timothy pouring an extraordinary amount of bleach onto his patio, creating a scent so strong that it irritated the eyes of passers-by. These behaviors were highly anomalous. It seemed inexplicable that a man whose girlfriend had just disappeared would focus his energy on an intense, multi-day outdoor cooking session rather than assisting in the search. When the fire department had responded to the smoke complaint, Timothy had claimed he was preparing food for a large church gathering. A firefighter recalled seeing what appeared to be raw meat soaking in a bathtub inside the apartment. Recognizing the gravity of these reports, Tanisha's family contacted Quannell X, a prominent community activist in Houston who often facilitated peaceful surrenders of individuals wanted by law enforcement. Interestingly, Timothy's family had also reached out to Quannell, claiming that Timothy was being unfairly targeted by investigators. Quannell X arranged to meet Timothy privately at his apartment. Timothy was visibly stressed, paranoid that the apartment might be monitored by authorities. He insisted that they talk in the bathroom. When Quannell looked him in the eyes and asked him directly if he had harmed Tanisha, the psychological weight of the crime became too heavy for Timothy to bear. Timothy confessed that when Tanisha refused to discuss her relationship with Mark Marks and attempted to leave the apartment, he flew into a jealous rage. He attacked her, strangling her to death. Timothy told Quannell that he had placed her body in the dumpster behind the apartment complex. Quannell immediately contacted investigator Sidney Miller. On Wednesday, March 21st, 2007, at 5:30 in the afternoon, the investigators, accompanied by Quannell and Timothy, drove to the apartment complex dumpster. To their horror, the dumpster was completely empty. It had been cleared by the sanitation service earlier that week. The realization was devastating. In a city of Houston's size, the contents of the dumpster had already been transported to a massive regional landfill. A search of the landfill would cover an area equivalent to multiple football fields, costing upwards of $500,000 with an extremely low probability of success. Tanisha's family, showing incredible grace and strength, requested that the county not expend those resources on a potentially futile search. Shortly after his arrest, Timothy invoked his right to counsel and refused to speak further. Without a body, prosecutors knew that securing a conviction for murder would be an immense challenge. The crime scene investigation team returned to Timothy's apartment for a much more meticulous forensic search. Using advanced forensic techniques, investigators discovered microscopic evidence that Timothy had tried to destroy. Inside the kitchen garbage disposal, they found tiny bone fragments and a piece of tooth enamel. The crime lab subsequently matched the enamel to Tanisha's dental profile. Additionally, investigators recovered charred bone fragments from the ground near the patio, where the grills had been operated. The psychological reality of the crime was far more gruesome than a simple strangulation. The evidence suggested that Timothy, in a desperate attempt to conceal his actions, had dismembered and incinerated the remains of the woman he claimed to love. The trial of the state of Texas versus Timothy Shepard began on September 29, 2008. The prosecution faced the hurdle of presenting a murder case without a body, relying primarily on forensic fragments, the confession to Quan Nell X, and circumstantial evidence. To establish premeditation and character, the prosecution called Timothy's cousin Nicholas Shepard to the stand. Nicholas delivered shocking testimony, revealing that Timothy had previously made threats regarding Tanisha, stating that if she ever attempted to leave him, he would kill her, dismember her, and boil her remains. This testimony illustrated that the horrific method of disposal is not a spontaneous decision made in panic, but a scenario Timothy had contemplated before. Quan Nell X also testified, recounting the confession in the bathroom. In a bold move during the sentencing phase, Timothy took the stand in his own defense. He attempted to portray himself as the victim, claiming that Tanisha had attacked him with a knife and that he had acted in self-defense, blacking out during the struggle. He presented photographs of minor cuts on his hands from the night of his arrest. However, any attempt to garner sympathy was shattered during cross-examination. When the prosecutor asked Timothy about placing her body parts on the barbecue pit, Timothy corrected the prosecutor, stating that he had used a smoker, not a barbecue pit. This cold, clinical correction revealed an absence of remorse that deeply impacted the jury. The jury returned a verdict of guilty. Timothy Shepard was sentenced to 99 years in prison, the maximum penalty allowed. While the conviction could not restore the brilliant future that had been stolen from Tanisha Stewart, it ensured that a dangerous individual would remain removed from society, and it stood as a testament to the dedication of her family, the community, and the investigators who refused to let her disappear without a trace. The Shadow of Infatuation and the Case of Latrice Curtis. Our second case study takes us to Raleigh, North Carolina, where we examine how an individual's internal obsessions can project outward, resulting in a violent tragedy involving an innocent third party. On the cold winter morning of Wednesday, January 30th, 2008, at approximately 7:30, morning commuters on Interstate 540 noticed a disturbing sight. Lying in the grass on the shoulder of the busy highway was the body of a young woman. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but she was already deceased. An initial examination revealed that she had not been the victim of a pedestrian traffic accident. She had been brutally stabbed over 40 times, with severe wounds concentrated around her face, neck, and torso. Her carotid artery and jugular vein had been severed, and her vocal cords had been cut. It was a crime of extreme violence, indicating an intense, personalized rage. A short distance down the highway, investigators located a white sedan abandoned on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. Inside the vehicle, there were clear signs of a violent struggle, including a broken center console and blood on the driver's side door. Among the commuters slowing down to pass the crime scene that morning was Darren Curtis. He noticed the backup, saw the blue tarp covering the victim, and then spotted the white sedan. His heart sank as he recognized the vehicle. It belonged to his wife. Frantic, Darren returned to the scene, where detectives confirmed his worst fears. The victim was his 21-year-old wife, Latrice Curtis. Latrice was a vibrant, ambitious business administration student at North Carolina Central University in Durham. She had grown up in a protective household as the only girl among several brothers, cherished for her infectious smile and outgoing personality. She had married Darren, a respectful former National Guard soldier, just 9 months prior. They had moved into a cozy apartment, and by all external appearances, they were a young couple embarking on a promising life together. As investigators processed the crime scene, they noted that Latrice's hands showed defensive wounds, indicating she had fought fiercely for her life. The crime scene investigators collected DNA samples from her fingernails and the steering wheel of her car, sending them to the state crime lab. To understand the motive behind such a brutal attack, detectives interviewed Darren Curtis. He explained that he had last spoken to Latrice around 10 o'clock the previous evening. She had called to say she was running late from her studies and was going to get food before heading home. Darren had gone to sleep around 11:30. When he awoke the next morning, his calls to her went straight to voicemail. Assuming she had stayed overnight with her family, he showered and left for work, only to encounter the tragedy on the highway. Investigators searched the couple's apartment and Darren's vehicle, finding no evidence of conflict. Darren showed no signs of physical injury, and his cooperation was absolute. A critical breakthrough occurred during the autopsy. Pathologists discovered a condom inside Latrice's body. There were no physical trauma marks indicating a sexual assault, suggesting that she had engaged in consensual intercourse shortly before her death. This discovery shifted the focus of the investigation toward her personal life. Subpoenaed phone records revealed a flurry of calls and text messages around midnight on the night of her disappearance. These calls were exchanged with a number registered to Stephen Randolph. Stephen Randolph was a prominent student and athlete at North Carolina Central University, an aspiring basketball player with ambitions of entering the National Basketball Association. When investigators contacted him, Stephen initially claimed they were merely classmates. However, when presented with the phone records and the forensic findings, he admitted to a secret, passionate affair. Stephen explained that on the night of Tuesday, January 29th, Latrice had visited his residence. During their intimate encounter, the condom had become lodged inside her. Unable to retrieve it, Latrice decided to return home to handle the situation in private, leaving around 10 o'clock. Stephen claimed that after she left, he drove to the residence of his primary girlfriend, Velma Newton. During that drive and later in the night, Latrice began calling him repeatedly, expressing panic that she might become pregnant. Stephen insisted he had nothing to do with her murder, pointing out that an unwanted pregnancy could have jeopardized his athletic career, but denying that, he would resort to violence. To verify Stephen's timeline, detectives interviewed his roommate, Robert Reeves, a 43-year-old local pastor and motivational speaker known in the community as the Bishop. Reeves had rented a basement room to Stephen when the young athlete was facing financial difficulties. Reeves confirmed that Latrice had visited Stephen that evening. He stated that he had left the house at 8:15 to attend a church service and returned at 11:30, at which point both Stephen's and Latrice's cars were gone. Reeves also mentioned that Stephen owned a collection of knives and swords, which immediately drew the attention of investigators. However, as detectives dug deeper, Stephen's girlfriend, Velma Newton, provided critical context. She verified that Stephen had arrived at her home around 10 o'clock and stayed until 1 in the morning. More importantly, she revealed that she and Stephen had been subjected to a series of anonymous, threatening phone calls warning them to end their relationship. On one occasion, Stephen had discovered that all 4 tires on his car had been slashed. The investigation took a dramatic turn when